Welcome back to another episode. So, before we get started, I just want to say thank you for, coming here and watching me do, some things and talk about movies that I like or used to like and decided that maybe I don't like them as much as what I thought I did. But, anyways, thank you for your support. And tonight, we're going to talk about a movie or when it first came out in 2013. It had a lot of controversy. There were some images and things in it that people didn't really like, and people have their own opinion of this director, anyways. I'm just gonna come out right off the top and say that I am a big fan of his movies and of his music. Just gonna put it out there. I'm a big fan all around. And the leading actress. A lot of people say that she's a terrible actress and she's only getting movies because her husband is putting her in them. But again, like, I really genuinely like her. And I mean, in the roles that she does, I think she does pretty good. I mean, my judgment might be a little skewed because I may have just the teensiest, girl crush on her and have since, I was in, middle school. But, that's okay. That's okay. So, I mean, so God might hate the Lords of Salem, but around these parts, we love them. And so with that, it is the Lords of Salem that I am talking about today. So, it was produced by several different, pretty like indie production companies. So we have Alliance, I Am Global, Haunted Movies, and then, like, as of right now, the copyright and everything for distributing is under Anchor Bay Films, which also believe Phantasm 3 from, back the first episode is under Anchor Bay as well nowadays. So release date, March 11th, 2013. Oh. And, like, I normally say the tagline, like, right before, right, after saying the movie title. But, I mean, it wouldn't really fit with this one because, I mean, you guys didn't know I was doing this, so you haven't been waiting. But the tagline is, we've been waiting. We've always been waiting. It's kind of creepy. And, like, when we get into it, you see that they've been waiting a long time. Like, since the Salem witch trials, long time. Anywho. Okay, so, I mean, you already know writer, director, producer, Rob Zombie. I think his movies are fantastic. There was one that was kind of off for me, which was 31. But, like, all of his movies, even when he did the Halloween remake, which was kind of, like, dulled down for him, like, all of them have pieces of them that are very, like, artsy. Like in 31, all of the, ballroom looking scenes where they're in the powdered wigs and the colonial, royalty like outfits. It's just visually stunning. Now, as far as that movie went, maybe we'll talk about it another time. Maybe we won't, because, to be honest, I don't know what I'm going to do from day to day, much less what I'm going to want to talk about, like, maybe, a couple months down the road. We fly loosey-goosey around these parts. Okay. enough with the silliness. Let's get back on task. So the cast, Sherry Moon Zombie is our leading lady as Heidi Hawthorne. She is a radio DJ, overnight, like, midnight, late night, situation with the Big H team. So her co-hosts on the radio station are Herman and Herman. So we'll go with the first Herman. That is Jeffrey Daniel Phillips. He plays Herman Whitey Salvador. He's kind of, the goof of the group. He's the one that, is doing the soundboard with the crazy sound effects, just cracking jokes constantly. But you can see that he has a really big heart, and he really cares for Heidi very deeply, as we see going on in the film. And then we have Mr. Ken Forgy. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm really bad, and I love Ken, and I still, 9 times out of 10, can't even pronounce his last name. But I love Ken. He's great. He plays the other Herman Jackson, and he is kind of like, I don't know, he has the attitude of Shaft, just badass, The only person he's afraid of is his wife, which, we don't get to see her, but I'd like to. If she has to put up with him, she's got to be pretty badass herself. And then we have Mr. Bruce Davidson as Francis Matthias. He goes onto the radio station, how we're introduced with him. He goes onto the radio station to promote a book that he's writing. And then he kind of falls down the rabbit hole with Heidi, kind of trying to figure out where something came from and put the pieces together of, Salem's history. That's what he's really focused on his whole career, is Salem, Massachusetts history and the Salem witch trials and just all of the information that goes along with that. And then we come to Meg Foster in probably the creepiest role that I've ever seen her in. Also, you see a lot of her body. She's naked a lot in this movie. Almost every scene she's in. So she plays Margaret Morgan, and she's head witch back in the Salem witch trials. And, she's put a curse on the Hawthorne family name that's followed for centuries. And then present day witches include Dee Wallace as Sunny. Her character, up until the point that we see what they're really wanting to do, she's very, very friendly, very even with Mr. Francis, she's, do you have a wife? What about kids? She's very inquisitive about people, but very flirtatious with everyone as well. And not afraid to get her hands dirty again with Francis. Then we have kind of their leader of sorts nowadays, Miss Judy Geeson, as Lacey Doyle. She's the one that I guess kind of, figured out who Heidi was. Heidi rents the room from her that she lives in, which, by the way, Heidi's apartment is amazing. But she is the landlord of the building in which Heidi is renting from. And then we have the lovely queen herself, which actually, I think technically she has some, royal name She's like a duchess or something. I can't remember exactly right now. But Miss Patricia Quinn as Megan. She has a palm reading for Heidi. She's very brass, very like to the point, matter of fact, which I mean is just, she's just great all around. I love her. If any of you guys are fans of, Rocky Horror Picture Show, then, you know her as Magenta, which I couldn't tell you how many times I've gone as Magenta for Halloween. And Rocky Horror is still like my number one all-time favorite movie, and probably will be forever. It's just amazing. I have the soundtrack like on repeat a lot during the year. And I may or may not have my windows down singing to the top of my lungs at every song. And I may or may not have a burlesque routine to Hot Patootie dressed as Eddie. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. So, let's talk about the soundtrack here. So, the soundtrack was one of the guys working on the soundtrack and who actually did the Lords of Salem music that kind of entrances people is John Five, which, again, if you guys are Rob Zombie fans, you'll know that, John is his guitarist. And I mean, with Rob Zombie, like, doing a movie, you would expect for it to have a killer soundtrack. And it does. I mean, we've got Rick James, Rush, The Velvet Underground, like I said, John Five. They use Beethoven and Bach as well in some of the scenes. But like the main piece of this movie, which is the recording from the Lords of Salem that Heidi receives, as simple as it is, it's so eerie and creepy every time you hear it. And then the images that go along with it that Heidi sees just like amped that up to, the thousandth degree. I am getting all jumbled today. But so soundtrack is just mwah. And I mean, like I said in the last episode of Bad Channels, like a soundtrack can really like make or break a movie for me. If you and it does for a lot of people, if you don't have the right like music setting for a certain, scene, you just don't get the right tone. You don't get the right feeling. So, I mean, I'm always about the music and things as well. And if I really like the soundtrack, I buy it and I listen to it all the time. So this was up for several awards and it did win one. So we've got the South by Southwest Film Festival. They were a nominee for the Audience Award. Midnight Films. That's all the information that I have on that. I guess it was like, that was the category, was Midnight Films, and it was an audience like choice award. So they were nominated for that. This ticks me off. This one makes me upset and hurts my heart. So Fangoria Chainsaw Awards, nominee for worst film. Ugh. Like, I know critics didn't like it, and I know that a lot of people don't like it, but, I mean, worst film is really kind of harsh, so I'm glad that they, didn't win, and I didn't even think to look up who won that. So sad. And then the Fright Meter Awards. So they were nominated for Best Cinematography. Oh my gosh. Guys, words. Some of them are really hard for me. Best Cinematography. sometimes I just have to slow down. So nominee for that, didn't win, but they did win for best score. So John 5, congratulations on your win on that one. I mean, that's really, like I said, the score was just great. So let's get into the movie, shall we? I'm just gonna, notes hitting the floor. Anyways, so we start off the movie like full force back into the Salem witch trial era. We've got, Margaret, who is frolicking in the woods, calling upon the devil with her other witches. We have the Reverend Jonathan Hawthorne, who is furiously writing in his journal about how, she's out there courting with her, other tribe members, her coven, to enslave the women of Salem. And cut to, present day. We see Heidi laying in her bed with her butt showing. Guys, there's a lot of nudity in this. A lot of nudity. Full frontal, but so much. But anyways. So, we see her just kind of getting ready for her day. She goes out to get the newspaper from her door, and she notices that the number 5 apartment looks like it has a tenant now. So when she's leaving for the day, she, says something to the landlord, Miss Lacey, and she's like, oh, so I see the dreaded number 5, has been occupied. And, she's like, no, not renting it to anyone. And she goes up and she checks, and, there's nothing out of the ordinary. So, whatever. So the next thing that we see is the Big H team, Heidi, Herman, and Herman, in the studio doing their radio, cast. And after they wrap it up, there is a package for Heidi. Now, Heidi doesn't, go by her actual name, which, most DJs on the radio don't. On the radio, she goes by Heidi LaRock, not Heidi Highthorne. So for someone to send a package to the radio station with her actual name, it's kind of odd. And it's a vinyl, it's a record in a wooden box. It says it's from the Lords. And it's, kind of strange, kind of odd. Well, her and Whitey, when we're talking about him, we're going to call him Whitey because, there's 2 Hermans here. So her and, Whitey go to her apartment for some, late night snacks. Because, who isn't hungry after working really late at night? I'm hungry late at night and, not even working past 4 o'clock in the day. But they decide to put it on when there's, some dead air. And Heidi starts to have these visions of, back in the Salem witch trials. And, they're kind of just, at first they're not super disturbing. They're kind of tame a little bit at first. But we also, notice that, it fully messes with her. So she's like, I'm just going to go to bed, and Whitey's, I guess, is going to stay on the couch. But she, gets up in the middle of the night to get, a drink, and then you see, a flash. She walks through the bathroom, and in the bathroom you see a flash of Miss Margaret Morgan, and you're like, oh no, some stuff's really going to start happening now. And so everything that happens in this movie happens from Monday to Saturday. Literally 6 days is all that this takes place in. so the next day she's, going about her business, you know, just, a normal day. So she goes, to the radio, and they start, interviewing Mr. Francis about his book, and then they start playing the record from what they've now deemed the Lords of Salem, since, it came from, Salem. And we see that not only does this have an effect on Heidi, because she asks them to, turn it down in the booth, that it's giving her a headache, but we see different areas of Salem and the women having, a reaction to this music that they're hearing. And so you're like, okay, well, what is this? And Francis goes home and he talks to his wife, and she's like, yeah, I, recorded it for you. And he's like, did you hear that music? And she's like, yeah, it was, awful what people have as music nowadays, or consider music nowadays. But she's not originally from Salem. She's originally from Brazil or somewhere in South America. So she listened to it, and later on she plays it on her piano and doesn't have any sort of reaction to it. So obviously it's just women that are in Salem that are having reactions, bloodline from Salem having reactions to this. Interesting. So as we go on, I'm not going to go through all kinds of details. We do, she does start having increasingly weirder and hardcore, images popping up. One lady gives birth to what they were hoping was going to be Satan's child, but isn't. And so Margaret spits on the child and is cursing at it, and and when I say cursing, I mean actual witch cursing type situation. And you get the full on feeling that she's going to have this child killed, because she just can't stand how pure and innocent it is. So I think that might be one of the reasons why it was controversial. Repeatedly spitting on a baby, I can see where people would get upset about that. But sometimes art has to offend. Sometimes it does. To get what you want to say across, sometimes it offends. Anyways, so Heidi doesn't understand what's going on. She falls back into a habit that's bad. But while she falls into this, drug state, that's when the witches kind of come in and hover over her and don't let anyone near her. Even towards the end, when Herman is trying to get her out to go to the Lords of Salem. We're going to have a one night only concert, and they only have so many tickets. And basically the big H team is hosting this, thing. Even then, they, don't even let him in the room. He's they're you're going to have to wait outside. But let's backtrack just a little bit before that happens. So, Friday night, the night before the big concert, the witches wheel Heidi in a wheelchair in front of apartment 5. And they draw this symbol in front of the door in a circle, calling upon Satan, and the door opens. Heidi stands up and walks into the apartment. And what is in that apartment is ridiculous. Like, it's like she just stepped into a whole different world. It looked like a palace. Like, it was crazy. And then at the top is like this weird little, it's supposed to be Satan, but it's not like the Satan that like we all like think of with the horns, and he looks more like a cross between a crawfish and a person. It's all like weird nubbies, just like, and he doesn't talk, he just like screeches. And I mean, that was kind of odd. And this whole part is quite, you know, like, this is where we're really getting into like the artsy situation, because the colors of everything that are in it, it really reminds me of, I mean, I hate to say this again, but it really reminds me of some of like Argento's things that he did with color in Suspiria. Just the use of color in this is amazing, because Heidi, with her blonde hair and her corpse paint and her black and like kind of tan like sweater, she is a stark difference, just so bland and stark difference to the area around her, that it really stands out like a lot. But so she doesn't really like, I don't know, like he has some like tentacle things that come out of his like abdomen area, and she like holds onto him and she like shakes, and he shakes and she shakes, and then she's back in her bedroom. And then he shows up in her bedroom. I don't know. A lot of this you kind of have to, people say that there's, you know, the plot doesn't make sense or whatever, but what he's doing is he's making you think about it. He's not just handing it to you on a platter and saying, here, consume. He's making you think about it and really kind of, you know, I mean, some things you just need to figure out on your own. And that's just how it is. All right, so the night of the big concert, the big finale, right? So you notice that there's not a whole lot of people in the theater. Also, Heidi locks Herman and Herman out of the theater. So it turns out that the theater is just full of women. Just full of women. And the three witches, like the curtain rises, angelic white light, which is really funny that it looks so angelic when they're like trying to call upon, you know, Satan. But the three witches are there, and they're doing their, you know, chanting and their incantation, and then the witches from Salem come up behind them, and there's Margaret Morgan, and they start playing the Lords of Salem, you know, song, which is, I mean, can't really call it a song, really. It's more like a, I don't know, it's more like a tribal-esque, like, you know, drumming with like a weird like screeching violin, maybe like a woodwind of some sort that they fashioned. But so like Heidi and all of the other women are having this reaction to this song, and Heidi's up in the balcony while all the other women are down in the lower level. So all the other women start taking their clothes off and going up onto the stage. But we see Heidi like ends up like in the lobby area, and like she's sitting on her bed. Like it looks like her bed and like the backdrop of her wall and everything. And then some weird images happen. We've got like priests and like a pope like figure with like these weird like faces, like jacking off. But they're dildos. Like they're clearly not like, you know, actual penises. Like they're bright pink and, you know, they're whatever. So you see that, and like Heidi's like sitting there in her, you know, black metal t-shirt. And then she starts like riding a goat with these neon flame situation behind her. And then like the guy that's on her shirt starts riding the goat. And then she's like dancing up all on him. I don't know. That scene really doesn't make any sense to me. But the imagery is really nice. And the use of color, again, is super, super cool. Like the neon lights are beautiful. So then we cut to Heidi. Seems like she's back, like during the Salem witch trial era again. But she's there in, you know, a very plain, almost potato sack looking, you know, garb on a birthing rock. And she gives birth to what I can only say is, again, a crawfish. That's what it looks like. It looks like a weird little crawfish, lobster, this one doesn't even have anything that looks like a human. It just literally looks like some kind of sea creature just came out of her. But, you know, she doesn't make it. She dies. She dies. That was her purpose, I guess. So after that scene, and Margaret is loving on this weird crawfish Satan baby, I guess. I don't know, guys. It's kind of weird. We see a pile of dead bodies. Like all the women that were in the theater. Just piled up dead bodies. And Heidi looking very like ethereal, you know, just standing on top of them. So I'm only assuming that that means that she's like moved on, maybe to heaven, because like I said, she's very ethereal. She's got like, you know, what looks to be like the halo situation going on. And the three witches, you know, are just like looking up at her, like crying. They're so happy. And then as the ending credits are rolling, we hear Heidi's radio station talking about, you know, the police finding like 32 like women of Salem dead. And the connection that they all have is their ancestors were like the original, like, you know, settlers of Salem. And I mean, that's creepy. And then Heidi, like, she's just disappeared. Nobody knows where Heidi went. Like, there's no body, no nothing. Like Heidi never even existed. Just disappeared. But the cops are saying, you know, that's a mass suicide. And then that's it. That's where it ends. So, like I said, can be controversial. That's okay. Some people don't like the imagery. Some people don't like that at the end it got artsy. And for them didn't really, you know, like, sometimes things don't have to make sense. Like, you know, directors and artists in general don't have to do things that make sense. You know, sometimes you just gotta look at it at what it is and enjoy the moment that it gives you and the imagery that it gives you. Because this does have some very striking imagery in it, and the use of color, like I said, is gorgeous. I like bright neon red, and he uses that a lot, and it's just so pretty. And he didn't use like any of the, original names from the Salem witch trials, which we all, like, a lot of us all know, just from other works of art from, based on that time period, and just the information that's out there. He didn't use any of those. Like, he gave everyone, like, new names. But yeah, I don't see why so many people like crap on this movie. It's a good movie. It's one of my favorites. It's just strikingly gorgeous. And I mean, I don't know. I get kind of upset when people like just rip things to shreds and yeah, are just kind of mean. Some people have been really mean about, about, you know, Miss Moon's performance and a lot of things. But, I mean, with every movie that she does, she gets better, you know? And, I mean, there's a lot of people that have, made horror, like, their thing. And I mean, in a lot of cases, and 90% of horror movies, you don't necessarily have to be a good actor. You don't have to be like, sometimes you don't have to be like Meryl Streep. Okay? I mean, sometimes that just doesn't, no one needs to do an Oscar winning performance every movie. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, I'm gonna get off my soapbox for the night. Please check out Lords of Salem if you haven't. Tell me what you think. I mean, I like it. I like Rob. Director, writer, musician, everything he does. Just love it. So again, like, I might be a little biased. But anyways, I hope that you guys have a wonderful Saturday and that you come back and see me next week, because like I said before, who knows what I'm going to come up with next. Bye, sinners. Have a good night.